Hey, Faith students!
Ooh.
It is Kenny here again.
And Madison.
And boy, oh boy, are things changing outside by the day. Spring is here and we are pumped. I don't know about you, but the birds are chirping
The sun is definitely shining.
and the chipmunks are a digging.
Yes.
No, seriously, there are chipmunks in our front yard digging what it seems like tunnels into our house. But hey, we are pumped to be back again on this Sunday morning with all of you to share another habit, a habit that we can practice, a habit that we can be a part of to be able to really just grow closer to the Lord. And so today's habit is
Sabbath.
the Sabbath.
Yes.
Now, a word that maybe a lot of us are familiar with, but really don't know how to practice or how to be a part of it. And so today we want to talk a little bit about the importance of Sabbath, why we should do it, and even how to do it. And so with that being said, Madison, can you tell us what it exactly means to practice the Sabbath?
Yes, I would love to. So this idea of Sabbath, also known as a day of rest, I think can be misunderstood when we don't really understand what that word rest means. I think that that's really, really key to know what rest means. I think for a lot of us, when our minds go to rest, we might think of just, shutting down for the day, laying on the couch, watching TV.
Scrolling through Instagram
Yes.
for 3
totally.
hours.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe some TikTok. No.
TikTok.
Yeah. These types of things that we often associate with rest, but I think Sabbath gets at this different type of rest, this rest that we need so much more than that temporary rest that those things bring. And so I think we see this in creation as the first place where God brings up this idea of Sabbath. He works for 6 days and then rests on the seventh. And so it is a picture of something so much deeper than just this physical rest, but it's actually very internal. And so I think that this quote that the author in The Common Rule, the book that we've been going through, here it is. Shout out to him.
Justin.
He says in the book that the rest beneath the rest is the knowledge that in Jesus all work is finished. This is why Augustine wrote, "My soul is restless until it finds rest in you." And I've always just loved that quote so much because when we experience the rest in Jesus, we really do understand that that's where real rest is found. And so Sabbath is a day that's set apart, meant to be filled with things that point us to that rest in Jesus that can only be found in Him, that He has already finished the work on our part. And so our work isn't what is our driving force for our life, but it's resting in Him and then working for Him. And so it's also important to think that these are in the day, like to find this rest. It's actually really engaging things. It's things that can take a lot of work. Sometimes it takes work to find rest in Jesus, but that's not a bad thing. That's really good to do these things that are engaging, that we'll soon talk about specifically what that might look like for you.
That's a really good quote that Augustine said. Him and I are good buddies. We go way back. So with that information, Madison, on what the Sabbath rest is exactly and what that looks like, can you tell us a little bit more on why is Sabbath rest so important then to make it a weekly habit?
Yes. I think it's really important because it reminds us of these different truths, especially, once again, coming back to the Common Rule. Justin talks about these, in this chapter specifically, three things that the Sabbath teaches us. And so one is God sustains the world and we don't, which is really good. Number two, to embrace our limitations. And number three, the world doesn't hang on what we can accomplish, but rather on what God has accomplished for us. So those three things are essential for us to remember. Taking one full day in our week to just sit in those truths, to fill our days with things that remind us of that, is so important because we are just really forgetful. We forget that, and then we start thinking that life is actually about us instead of the Lord. But that when we focus on those things for one day, then it helps us throughout the week.
That's really good. I really like those three things that you just listed. For me personally, I often think that if I were to rest, then the world will just stop, and that's just not the case, right? The Lord is
Definitely
sovereign over that, and the world has definitely continued to spin. One thing that I've always kind of understood about Sabbath is just that you practice it one day a week. So do I just like rest in Jesus one day a week? What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Like I kind of mentioned, that this rest that we find on the Sabbath is actually meant to impact the rest of our week. And so we take this day, and it is important. We see this rhythm, even in God and in creation, of working and resting, that it's important for us to work. It's important for us to do certain things that we pour ourselves out to other people and through different avenues. And so so that day of rest is meant to help us have that heart posture to rest in Him, and then allow from that rest overflow out of us working and serving for Him. And so this type of rest happens throughout the week, all throughout the week, but it is important to have one specific day that you actually don't work. So usually the rest of the 6 days is mix of rest and work. But this one day that God has given us, which is such a gift, that He's given us this day because He knows that we need it. We need one day set apart, putting away the work that we do, and just focusing on His accomplished work for us. This is really vital for us to do.
That's really helpful. I appreciate that. Now, I get a little insider scoop on how you practice the Sabbath weekly. I'd be curious to know if our students would be interested on what do you do weekly for your Sabbath practice?
Yeah, I'd love to share just like a few things that that usually happens on our Sabbath. I know that this might sound very weird to a lot of you, probably. Probably, yeah.
What are you gonna
everyone.
say?
But I really enjoy taking the opportunity to go on a longer run, and so I usually don't have as much time to go on.
Doesn't sound very restful.
Exactly. It maybe doesn't sound like it, and I am exerting a lot of energy, but I think that's a really good example of, although I'm exerting energy and I'm not just sitting around, I am experiencing rest in the Lord, because I really can experience Him through running, and so I really enjoy doing that. That's something. Really enjoy, having really good food. I think that points to our good God, that He's given us really awesome food to enjoy. Really intentional conversation that does take work. It's engaging, and you have to put the effort, but it does bring rest. If me and Kenny try to have more longer conversations of just being able to point each other to the Lord during that day, and we find that that's really restful and helpful. Yeah,
that's great. Now, I don't know if any of you are going to sign up to go on a long run on a Saturday or a Sunday or a Tuesday for your day of rest, but I'm curious to know how our students can start practicing Sabbath this week.
Yeah, so this week we would love if you just chose one day,
one day.
And maybe talking to your family, seeing what day would work best, to put away all those things that you really have to pour yourself out into. So I know homework is a really big one for you guys. It's so important. I had to learn this in college, that it's hard to put away homework feeling like you can always do more, but it's so important to stop our work and to remember that God has finished the work for us, and that we're now able to just enjoy the things that we work at. And so one is picking a day, and then something that I think could be helpful for you is to maybe pick 3 things that you want to incorporate into the day, to add to your day, to spend the day doing, and then pick 3 things that you'd want to avoid. And so, one thing might be going for a walk with your family, or, a prayer walk. That'd be, I'm sure, very engaging and encourage your heart towards the Lord. And then maybe one thing would be putting away homework or something like that. So just start there. Write down 3 things that you want to incorporate, and then 3 things that you want to avoid during that day. And that might change, but it's a good place to start. And so as we go into this week, as we practice the Sabbath, I want to encourage you guys to hear Jesus' words in Matthew 11:28, when he says, "Come to me, all who are heavy laden, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." So he offers that rest for us as we work hard.
So we don't have to go to ourselves to find that rest. We would go to the Lord to find that rest.
Exactly.
That's a good word. Well, hey, we hope that this week is one full of rest, but that you would even find one day to rest more in the Lord. And maybe that is going on a walk with your family. Maybe that is sleeping in a little bit. Maybe that is spending more time in the Word of God individually. And so we hope that this is encouraging for you, and that you would start to practice the Sabbath more intentionally. Yes. So that next week we'll talk about it, and we'll ask some questions on how that went for you, so that you can continue to practice the Sabbath.
Absolutely.
Any last words, Madison?
I think we covered it all.
Okay, well, we're signing off.